Okay. What's that?
Oh, that's just to confirm that you're okay with recording.
But okay. Let me try to move my mouse a little. Okay, thank you everyone for coming. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to share some of my research on designing intelligent technologies for everyday healthy living, opportunities and challenges. Yeah, I'm a new senior lecturer here in healthcare technologies and also a member of the GIST section. So I'm kind of working at the intersection of HCI and healthcare. And so as most HCI researchers, I think there are two main drives behind my research. One is driven by new interactive and collaborative technologies, try to find out what new user experiences are supported by these technologies, what kind of new social phenomena emerging around these new technologies. And the other drive is more from the social side. I try to do studies to understand some of the social issues and corresponding social practices so that we can design these technologies to better fit into the social practices and help address some of the social issues. So in the past, I've been looking into issues such as aging, green campus, social integrations with people with disabilities, and in recent years, more focuses has been on healthcare. So I'm particularly interested in technologies for everyday healthy living. When I mean everyday, which means beyond the hospital settings or clinical settings. So it's based on some observations of the trends. Today, for example, like healthcare technologies have moved out from medical settings and come into our everyday lives. So today it's very easy for us to just use our mobile phones or wearable technologies to check our health measurements such as stress, sleep, and heartbeat rate, and so on. And another trend is more from the social side due to various reasons, right? Aging issues or the increase of chronic diseases. So today, more and more emphasis is put on self-management beyond the hospital settings. So kind of this, the observation of these trends kind of make me very interested in how we can design technologies to help with everyday health living. So when I say everyday health living, it's actually just mean preventive health in everyday lives. But I prefer to use everyday health living because when people think about preventive health, they mainly think about, oh, I go to the hospital to do screening tests or to regular checkups or to vaccinations. But what I want to do is to focus more on how we can design technologies to help people make good choices in their everyday lives, like in terms of what things they should eat, how they should exercise. So in a way that it can help them to live healthily. So after all, based on previous research, it shows that the choices we make as individuals and the families have huge impact on our health, right? It actually contributes up to 40% of early deaths and poor health. So I believe that there's a huge opportunities here. We use those technologies that are becoming more and more available in everyday lives to help people to make good choices and to improve their quality of life and reduce expenses for medical reasons. So today I like to share two projects I've done along this line. One is based on face reading technologies for self-checkup and providing personalized recommendations. And another is on automatic stress checking technologies. So first is based on face reading technologies. So we all know that our faces show a lot of information about ourselves. We can recognize one's identity by looking at one's face. We can even tell whether one's happy or not just by looking at one's face, right? And so it also shows a lot of signs about health, internal health conditions. And so if you visit a doctor, usually the doctor will observe your face first and to derive some initial understanding of your health. For example, if your face or eyes look yellowish, probably indicates that there's some issues in your liver. And it's also true in traditional Chinese medicine. So face diagnosis is a very important component of the whole diagnosis process. So face diagnosis includes different parts. One is just do face inspection and also do tongue inspection. So we'll check your face color, face gloss, and also lip color, and tongue color, tongue shape, and so on, to kind of help to understand the health conditions. And so it's actually very standard process to do face diagnosis in TCM in traditional Chinese medicine. So actually in some clinical settings, they have these huge machines, very expensive machines and equipment to help people to do face diagnosis. But of course, what I'm interested in is because now these technologies have become easily available on mobile phones. So you can just use your mobile phone to take a photo of your face, and it will help to evaluate your health and provide suggestions. So now I just like to get some feedback actually from you. If we have this technology available on your mobile phone, and for you to take a photo of your face and tell your health conditions and give your suggestions, like in terms of what kind of things you should eat, what kind of things you should avoid, and how you should do exercise. Would you like to use it?
If I trust the
result,
like the developers, like if I trust the company behind it, because I would be worried, like if they have the part that analyze all of these things, I would be worried a bit about my privacy. But I mean, if there are good, privacy policies and stuff, I would definitely do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's clinically validated, so some of those things are questionable, but I'm a medical doctor, I'm not sure you can compare all of those things to the face with clinical validity.
Yeah, it's actually the technology we are looking at is not for disease diagnosis or for treatment, but more for kind of health kind of evaluation, and kind of suggest like what kind of things you should eat or avoid. So we kind of frame it as for preventive health, not for treatment. So it's developed with collaborations with doctors, but I don't think we have, yeah, I'll talk more about it. So actually, I myself got very excited about this kind of potential of using technology. Just you don't need to go to hospital. You can just use mobile phone to do health checkup. So since this particular project is based on TCM, so I like to give a little background of TCM to help you understand how it works. So TCM has been in China for thousands of years. One thing is that's very special about it, it's very much emphasized, so preventive health is very much emphasized there. So actually in the classic TCM book written 2000 years ago, it was already written that the best measure is to treat the disease before it happens. And so, and it also kind of treats our health differently. It treats health more in a more holistic sense. Instead of focusing on symptoms or diseases, it focuses more on kind of how balanced the body is. Right? If it's very balanced, that means you are very healthy. But if it's unbalanced, there are different ways that you are unbalanced. Then it will use the constitutional types to indicate how you are unbalanced. And with these constitutional types, you can provide suggestions in terms of how you should do, what kind of things you should eat to help reinstall the state of balance. So I just list a few constitutional types here, like balance means you're very healthy. And there are also kind of different kinds of unbalanced situations like qi deficiency, yang deficiency, yin deficiency, dampness, heat, and so on, kind of indicate before you get diseases or symptoms, but you can identify how unbalanced the body is already. So when I got interested in this project, one of my colleagues back in Fudan University had already developed a face diagnosis system, but that was mainly for clinical use. But anyway, they had all the underlying algorithms and models ready when I got involved in this project. So the underlying model was trained with over 150,000 patients' data. And the results were also evaluated with 2,000 volunteers, and it shows the accuracy of more than 85% compared to the results of doctors. So what we did is we adapt the application, the system, and developed a prototype to be installed on our mobile phones. And we call this prototype face diagnosis.
Just asking, when you say compared to the doctors, is this like modern medicine doctors or traditional Chinese?
Traditional Chinese medicine doctors. So here's the interface of this prototype. I just walk you through the different components to show how it works. So on the main page, it shows different steps people need to follow for self-checkup. There are 3 steps, right? Face inspection, tongue inspection, and inquiry. So you just take a photo, click on the face inspection and take a photo of your face. Click on the tongue inspection, take a photo of your tongue and answer a few questions. And then it will return a report, shows a score of your health, your constitutional type, like Qi deficiency, and suggestions in terms of diet, and how you can do some massages to help you to restore to a balanced state. So we had this prototype ready and try to understand how my people make use of this technology for everyday health. So do you think people will use it?
I think it seems like if you believe in the Chinese traditional medicine, then you will use it. But if you don't believe in that, you're probably not going to use it. Almost like ideology.
Yeah, it's kind of true. Luckily, in China, kind of traditional Chinese medicine is still kind of popular, although less popular among young people, but still kind of widespread, kind of part of our culture. Although most time people still rely on Western medicine, but kind of still for people to maintain health mainly, not for disease treatment many times. Yep.
So I think it depends on your user base, depending what the background is. In many cases, people with less access to education and health would actually, I think, would accept your results in a more unquestionable way. But people with more understanding of health, I don't think they would actually accept it at all.
They just don't trust the system, right?
Yes, unless you demonstrate that who is actually looking at your faces and how they're coming up with the assessment. So that needs to be somehow exposed. Right?
That's very true. Yeah.
But as I say, that there will be a certain user groups who would actually accept it because they don't have any other choices.
Yeah, it's true. I will come back to that later, actually. But for this stage, as you can see here, right, we don't have any explanations or exposure of how it works behind it. So that's part of the issue with this prototype, actually. Yep.
Quick question. Can you go back to the patient side? So it basically just gives you a report and then explains. I'm trying to understand the 4 pictures on the bottom or screenshots. These are just explanations of what you do.
Not much explanation. It's mainly kind of food suggestions and a kind of massages. Yeah, already recommendations. So yeah, actually we found we did a study. We did a field trial for 2 to 3 weeks. We had 10 participants. At the beginning, we collected their basic information and also helped install the application on their own mobile phones. And then they took the technology into their lives for 2 to 3 weeks. And then we had the conclusion interview and tried to learn how they use the application over time. So, but sadly, we found that actually towards the end of study, half of them actually uninstalled the application. So they totally abandoned the application. It's very sad to find out that, but fortunately we found some reasons behind it. So the one reason that's commonly reported by our participants is it always showed the same information and asked the same questions, and they got bored and just stopped using it. So that's, I think this kind of technology is different from stress assessing or blood level measurement because it's your constitutional type is likely to stay stable over time and will not change very often. So that's why they got bored after they check the application and always show the same information. And also reminds us of the difference between this kind of application, this kind of technology in everyday settings and in the clinical settings, right? Usually in the clinical setting, you don't expect much, right? You just go there, probably use it once and okay, got your results. But here people kind of expect it should know my last results already. It should be able to adapt to it instead of always ask the same question, right? So I think people expect to be more adaptive. One is to make it to kind of see new things. Another is hope that it actually learn about my situation all the time, not just kind of always ask the same questions. And another issue, it's kind of difficult for people to read and understand the report. And I show in these two codes, many of our participants, although they expressed interest that they wanted to have an application to help them to live more healthily, but most of them don't have the understanding of the basic concepts in TCM, like Qi. For example, I don't know much about TCM. For example, it says I'm Qi deficient, but what is Qi? Like, don't have that basic understanding of that. And also that, like, he doesn't know what are the 5 organs, although like in the report, it shows, oh, which organ is weak or which is strong, but he has no idea what these organs are. So that also, because that's everyday setting is very different from the medical settings, right? We don't have the healthcare professionals around to help explain things. It all relies on themselves to interpret and understand the report. And it's kind of difficult for most of lay people. And another issue is that everyday setting is definitely more complex, more uncertain compared to the clinical settings. Especially if you go to do checkup in the clinical settings, you expect that the environment is well controlled, the equipment is standard, but now we use their own mobile phones to do the checkup. And then and in the public settings and the varied settings, and introduce a lot of unpredictable variables and kind of limited how they want to use the application. For example, because the application asks them to take a photo of their tongue, and then many think that in a lot of situations, it's inappropriate that to do that in the public, right, with people around. So kind of limit when they can use the application. And usually they just, when they are in their private space by themselves, they will try it, but they kind of limit. If they wanted to know more about their own health and in other settings and there are people around, then they will not do it. And also a lot of unpredictable variables, not just they don't know how the underlying mechanism work, but they also don't know how the varied factors might impact the result, as shown in this quote. Face inspection showed my lip was too pale. I think the result caused by the lighting or the beautification algorithms on my camera phone. So it's even more unpredictable and hard for them to evaluate the reliability of the result. So that this prototypes is more or less a failure. Before we can examine how people can make use of it and whether it's effective or not, I think there's some usability issues involved in this prototype that prevent people from adopting it in the first place. But nevertheless, we also found some kind of implications for us to improve this kind of technology. One is that we should make it more adaptive, at least to show some changes and to adapt to their personal situations for them to use in a sustainable way. And second, it should be more transparent and provide more explanations, right? Because they don't know how to interpret and understand the report. And also it should be more flexible because everyday setting is just kind of very complex and uncertain. Probably instead of always ask them always to finish all the 3 steps, probably we can skip some steps, but still kind of provide some useful information for them. So this paper actually published at CHI, was presented here at Glasgow. So based on what we learned from that prototype, we actually developed another prototype by incorporating some of the design implications in this prototype. making it more adaptive, transparent, and flexible. So I walk you through how we do that. So we designed various ways to make it more adaptive. First is to make recommendations more adaptive. That's based on the understanding in TCM that our health is also influenced by the environmental factors, like by weathers and by the period of day, by the period of the day and by the season of the year. So we make use of that to make it more adaptive. So your constitutional type could stay stable, but then the time will change and the season will change. So we make suggestions in response to that. For example, on the main page, we provide suggestions based on the time of the day. So in China, we divide the day into 12 periods, and each period is believed to correspond to one organ, or for nurturing one organ. So it provides suggestions like based on that. For example, for this period time of the day, it's from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. That means the period of day is called a Wu, and that's the time for the body to nurture the heart. So we'll say, okay, to nurture your heart, to nourish your heart, you should take a nap. And I explain why you should do that. Because qi and blood flow into the heart, which is called heart channel hand-sawing. It's kind of complex here. But the heart promotes blood circulation, nourishes the mind, nourishes qi, and nourishes muscle. And so that can suggest you take a nap to nourish your heart and don't do strenuous exercise because you will take your blood away from your heart. So on the main page, we'll provide that kind of suggestion based on this particular time of the day. And in the end, in the health report, we also make it more responsive to the current season of the year. So in China, we have 24 solar terms of the year. And each solar term, we have different suggestions for certain constitutional type. We have different suggestions in different solar terms. So this screenshot also shows such an example. So it's the end of heat now, which is actually it's a current solar term. And implies that, as you can see here, TCM is developed in China. So that's also mainly applies to situations in China, probably limited its application to other parts of the world. So most parts in China are getting rid of the hot summer and entering autumn, and the rise and fall of the yin and yang in the human body will also change. You are qi deficient, and during end of heat, people with qi deficiency should pay attention to eliminating dampness and preventing cold. You might as well go hiking or go picking in the suburbs with friends to enjoy the joy of harvest. So provide more detailed suggestions based on the season of the year. So hopefully people will see some changes here. And more flexibility, actually in this new prototype, instead of using the traditional interface, we use chat box to streamline the interactive process. And then we also allow them to skip some of the steps, although in the final report, we'll inform them that because you skip some steps, it might impact the accuracy of the result. Just kind of expose more information to them for them to evaluate and to decide how they want to use the application. And also provided more, make it more transparent and provide more explanations. So for each step, for example, after you are done with the face inspection, I will show more details of your facial features detected using the algorithm, and also explain what that means, what causes that facial feature. And in the end, it will also provide very rich health-related knowledge and rationales behind the suggestions, not just providing suggestions, but why they provide that suggestions. As shown here, in fact, the fundamental cause of qi deficiency is weak spleen and stomach. You can eat more greens blah, blah, blah. And to invigorate the spleen and stomach so as to increase appetite, the body's ability to absorb nutrients. So it's a kind of try to not just give suggestions, but also rationales behind it.
Matthew, do you want to ask your question?
Hey there. So
Hello.
obviously I was raised in this kind of Western medicine tradition, and I'm wondering about, I'm just trying to get my head around a lot of the concepts that you are bringing forward here, like the Wu one and the timing of the day and the different aspects of the face being incredibly specific to different organs, because it's just like, this is pretty crazy here. I just like don't know what's going on. So is there some strong evidence that the concepts you're relying on here, how do they sort of link to Western medicine concepts, or either direction? And of course, what's the evidence that they're actually clinically beneficial rather than just popular?
I'm not sure whether in Western medicine we have similar things, but I definitely recently read some websites about reflexology. I think that's from Egypt. And I also have similar concept, like different parts of your foot actually correspond to different parts of your organ. So that's, I'm not sure in Western medicine, but I feel like this kind of more traditional alternative medicine, they share some similar things underlying it. And another thing with TCM, I think probably not clinically proved in Western medicine sense, but it's definitely they're kind of, it's accumulate, this kind of knowledge is accumulated over time based on people's experiences, the doctors' experiences with their patients.
But I mean, people,
like
there's
to
all
find
kinds of folklore about medicine and health that have, in the West too, but a lot of it is just being thrown away, even though they're really popular, because there wasn't the clinical evidence to support it. So I guess what I'm saying, popularity or length of history is not a guarantee of clinical effectiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think reflexology is also part of the sort of alternative medicine, where, whether those areas on the foot correspond to particular other areas in the body is hotly contended. So I think one of the questions I think I'm sensing sort of hanging in the room is, what can we take from this and apply it to other forms of health intervention?
Yeah, I think
that are not based on traditional Chinese medicine.
Yeah, I agree. I think traditional Chinese medicine also, it's a very also today had a very hard time in China too, because people think it's not scientific, although those believe in traditional Chinese medicine believe that there's just different ways to arrive at this knowledge, not through the Western scientific approach. But still, I think we should try some ways to probably, if it's true, then we should also use Western medicine approach to approve that. So hopefully, I think there's some attempts done in this direction. Probably it's more about other parts of the traditional Chinese medicine, but still kind of contentious. I don't know. Yeah.
I think, for me, it would be much more important to focus on perhaps the components that are available rather than the contents of those components, right, which are drawing on the beliefs of traditional Chinese medicine. So, it's much more important that, you would have a health report available that clearly outlines, what to do and why you should do that, rather than kind of focusing on, well, you should eat more glutinous rice, right? I mean, that's neither here nor there, right? It's sort of inspired by your evidence base, whatever that is. but I think I can sort of say, oh, okay, you know, an application in everyday use would need to have those recommendations and explanation of why you're making these recommendations. Right?
Mhm.
So it's like, it's just another level of abstraction on top of it.
Right.
Because I can see that if people disagree with traditional Chinese medicine, you're already at a disadvantage explaining this, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
I'll just, I propose a different perhaps way to look at this. As a possibility maybe claim, I don't know, I'm not sure this is my opinion, but it is an opinion that I will offer. I think it's a very interesting question because there is a very substantial number of people in China who are following this. And it's a well-established, it's maybe a somewhat controversial, but it is a very well-established practice. And the clinical evidence towards the not very strong, but not because it has been disproven, just because there have not been enough clinical trials to test the premises of Chinese medicine. So I think it's not that we know it doesn't work, it's just we never tested it in our clinical settings. But as HCI researchers, I think it's an interesting question. There is a large number of people who have followed these practices. Do we build technologies to support those practices that they have? Or do we challenge their practices and bring our own perspectives of maybe Western medicine? I mean, there's a lot of research in HCI that supports religious expression and other maybe less sort of scientifically proven behaviors and practices. And I don't, again, it's not that I know which way is right or wrong, but I think it's an interesting question to ponder. When we build technologies, how do we think about those less scientifically proven practices? Do we consider them legitimate and sort of help people to engage with them and express themselves? And or do we, as scientists in Western traditions in academic institutions, not do that?
Does that risk here?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that because I think the implication is very important. If you do a study and with the patients, real patients suffering from certain type of diseases, and the implication might be quite equal unless.
In this context, preventative health making dietary recommendations, I've been really venturing against that. This is relatively harmless.
Yeah, the gluten intolerance and makes a recommendation to eat more gluten-based foods based on the image of your face. And they trust it, and it's the only access to medical insights they have available because their disease economic status and their health will degrade over time based on the insights they get.
So that is definitely one perspective to use it.
But just talk about this, this could also happen with evidence-based medicine as well, right? If someone like proposes what seems to be Western medicine and through an app or something, and it's not really well validated, then this could also be something dangerous, right? So I think the content itself needs to be moderated regardless of what kind of health tips are being provided, whether it's evidence-based or non-evidence-based, it has to be checked anyway.
But I think, something is used for diagnosis and treatment, you actually have stringent standards that you have to meet because it is classed as a medical device.
Because we responsible.
Yeah, but what I mean is that this should be done in both types of like apps in general. So
Yeah, but that's saying for non-critical diseases, so there are evidences. Actually, there is a type paper around it by SMOZ where they actually scrapped Reddit posts to actually recommend certain type of interventions to people with chronic pain. And it seemed like that actually worked better than the real physicians, because they didn't have access to those clinicians at the point of requirement. So I mean, yeah, it's
Just to add to this, it's a very good point you're bringing because even in the Western science, if you look at food science, this is, I'm sorry, messed up discipline that changes its perspective on every decade. Egg yolks, cholesterol, low cholesterol. So even when we try to follow scientifically proven evidence, we really be making recommendations that 10 years from now will be easy to conflict. So it is shaky a bit.
I'm very happy. Thank you for the discussion. I think, yeah, actually the challenge here is not whether it's a scientifically proven or not, just people don't believe TCM, they will not use this kind of applications, kind of limits that who can use that actually. Okay.
Maybe I missed out your initial discussion. What is behind the system? Who is behind the system? Meaning like
It's an algorithm. It's a machine learning, machine learning model that developed with TCM doctors.
So where did it came from? Where did you find those images or some form of?
We had the model is trained with over 150,000 patients' images, photos,
But-
and we have TCM doctors to label, annotate the images, and so the model was developed based on that.
And how many conditions you had on that levels?
Conditions,
Meaning how many diseases or how
not
many-
diseases, kind of just different constitutional types, like probably about 9 constitutional types. Okay, so when people use this application now, assume that people believe TCM. What do you think? Will people use it? Based on, compared to the last prototype.
I think it sounds like fun as well. It could be fun.
Yeah, do you have?
It's more interesting to know whether those participants need a follow-up. Your application providing some documentation is being shown, even do a follow-up.
Yeah, I'm going to come to that. So we just, curious to find out how these improvements work. So we did another field trial with this new prototype with 13 participants. They all expressed the interest in TCM.
So you just answered my question. What did you assess their perspectives on TCM? Were they believers, non-believers?
Yeah, we actually, during our study, we also collected that information. So that's the field trial, very similar. We did a very similar field trial this time compared to the last one. So yeah, actually the results, it's much where it's much better accepted. No abandonment anymore. Actually, towards the end of the study, we still found people using the applications. And we found those whose families, like use more TCM traditions, they use this kind of applications more, definitely more frequently. So those are who from that culture will use this kind of application more. And they also like the conversation-based health checkup process because it's similar to consultation to a doctor. And they also like the information provided in this application is more tailored to their personal situations compared to the information they found online. And most of them believe the health report, feel it's accurate based on their own experience. And so for more details, then it allows us to see how people will follow the suggestions because at least they adopt the application, they integrate that into their everyday lives. Mhm.
Can you just go back to the participant list? I just noticed that they seem to be fairly young.
Yeah, that's true. At the beginning, we thought only older people will be interested in this kind of application, but actually we found younger people, as long as they believe in TCM and from a family that's believing in TCM, they actually use the application more. And because they got used to using digital technologies for health management.
So I was going to say, has it something to do with have smartphone use?
Right.
in the older generation?
And they do not just use smartphones, they also use health applications on smartphones. So most of them have used 1 or 2 applications, digital health applications. So in terms of effect, here's the answer towards that. they are very, very selective in terms of what kind of suggestions to follow. So mainly they'll follow those suggestions that are consistent with their own preferences. And if it's not consistent, they will probably do micro adjustment, but will not totally, for example, give up some of the habits, as shown in these two codes. In a recent use, the application recommended a yield to me. I quite like a yield myself. So I remember it clearly and ate it more often. And in other cases, I can't totally give up some food co-used to my favorite, but now I only eat it once in a while. So it's kind of depends what kind of suggestions they kind of selective in terms of, okay, it's my favorite, it's my preference, then I could just follow it. But if it's not, okay, I do some micro adjustment, but not totally radical change. And they're also very sensitive to the workload involved in following the suggestions. And this quote illustrates that. It asks me to go to bed and get up early most of the time. To be honest, I cannot do it like most of our students, right? It's hard to do. But however, I will adopt some small tips like blowing dry my hair after bath. So kind of small things, if it's easy to do, then just follow it. But if it's a lot of work, probably not. And we also interested to see some kind of temporal usage or patterns. As mentioned that on the main page, we show some suggestions that's corresponding to this particular time of the day. And we found people very like this feature very much, actually in this one. I remember once I checked the application at around 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. and I found that it was a good time to do muscle exercises. So I started exercising right away. And yeah, another case, my stomach is not that well. If I wanted to work overnight and this application told me it is time to nurture stomach, I would tell myself, you have to rest for now. So this kind of timely suggestion advice seems to make it easy for people to follow the advice, to take the advice and take some actions. And also people realize for these everyday choices, lifestyle choices, it takes time compared to medical interventions to take time for them to see effects. So they like to compare changes and check changes. Some participants made a specific effort to make sure the results are comparable over time. As in this case, I usually make a self-diagnosis in the morning in my bedroom. Different lighting conditions may influence the accuracy of face inspection, right? The same environment can ensure the consistency of results, so they will be comparable over time. So in a way, it reminds us that to design it in a way that's make it easy for them to compare and to track the changes over time would be important to support their sustainable use. And we also learned that people have more reflections and have some learning experience with this kind of application. In HCI, a lot of people working in this area, like design technology for everyday healthy living, the main framing is in terms of reflection, right? We provide a lot of self-tracked data like your activity data or health data, and for people look at the data and reflect on their own health or their own body. And we found using this application also support kind of a reflection, but not based on looking at the data, but based on answering the questions in the inquiry process, and also based on how they, when they read the report in the end, for them to reflect on their own experience and health, probably because the qualitative description of the report and the questions help them to do that. And where also people kind of internalize the knowledge they gained from the application, although they might not take immediate actions, but they kind of internalize the knowledge. And when opportunities come, they would just make right choices, as you in these two codes. Regibot helped me develop a deep understanding of food. Through this, I can pay more attention to my diet. And in another case, I didn't intentionally try out some eating advice, such as lotus leaf and bitter gourd. However, it came to my mind when I was ordering food at the restaurant.
Sorry, were they replying in Chinese and these were translations? Or?
Yeah, translations. So it kind of suggests to us sometimes, although they don't follow the suggestion right away, but kind of by internalizing the knowledge, when the opportunities are there, they will follow the suggestions and make the right decision. So that's what we found with the second prototype compared to the first prototype was much more successful. And we also learned kind of some of the challenges, opportunities of designing this kind of technology for everyday healthy living. First of all, we learned that everyday setting is very different from the clinical setting, and we should design things very differently for that. And also because everyday setting means more complexity, uncertainty, it's important to provide more transparency and explanations to leverage user agency for them to decide how they want to make the application into use in their everyday lives. And the third one is, I think, more frequent use might not necessarily the right way to evaluate how successful the application is, but for preventive health or everyday health living, regular use of this application for checkup is still important. And then in our project, we learned that by using some kind of temporal or rhythmic suggestions, by making more adaptive to the natural rhythms, it helped them to kind of use it more regularly. For example, they will use it at least every solar terms. This kind of application could be very workload sensitive, so probably we should take that into considerations when we provide suggestions. And then we also learned the different ways for self-reflections and learning. Okay, any questions so far? So that's that's the project based on face reading technologies and based on TCM. And since, although I'm personally do you have questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So although I'm personally very interested in TCM, I know it's kind of a lot of debates about it. So my next project, I look beyond TCM and face reading and look at automatic stress checking technologies, because that's
Chair, so
what time is it? Okay.
so the TCM part, so you mentioned it's very popular in China, right? I believe that age group also has access to mobile devices, right? A lot.
What's that? Sorry.
So I'm saying that, you know, like in one of the statements you made in the earlier presentation, that the TCM is more popular to let's say more elderly citizens in China, right? Your study cohort, the participants were mostly younger generation, right? So if you have redone the study with the different population, do you expect that your insights or the recommendations you're making now would actually be same? Just from, I know you haven't done that, but I just want to understand.
I think it's the same, although it's a culturally conditioned, it conditioned on some cultural issues. Like even these are young people, but they are from kind of families that still believe TCM practices, and they have no issue accepting this kind of technology. But even for older adults, there are some older adults, they don't believe TCM. So it's a kind of, the conclusion is not who I use this or not, but I think it's more, not in terms of age, but in terms of their cultural backgrounds. Like if they are from TCM related cultural backgrounds, probably they will use it. It's not based on age, I think. Okay. So I would just do this very quickly, because it's just, you know, everybody believes it's very important to prevent chronic diseases. So I look at the stress checking technology for everyday stress management, and we have all kinds of products available to help track our stress, although they work differently. Some will provide stress in real time, others will measure stress every 15 minutes or 30 minutes, but they're all based on the same mechanism behind it. It's a heart rate variability to measure your stress level, but it's actually measure your physiological stress, not your psychological stress when people think about it. So we try to find out how people make use this technology for health check, stress checking, for stress management, and we also found it's kind of very rare for people to engage meaningfully with the stress data although it's easily available on our smartwatches. So identify some of the reasons. One is usually people don't have the immediate awareness of the stress, because when people are stressed, they don't usually don't go to look at their stress level. They just focus on, we have to deal with the issues right now. So although research shows that in the moment data engagement is very important for reflection, but for stress data, we don't have that in the moment data engagement. And also people don't understand the underlying mechanism of stress checking, stress measurement, and so also leads some kind of trust issues. They don't know how they can trust the measurement. And also we don't have corresponding community behind it for stress checking, not like a sports checking. We have a lot of communities, sports related communities for people to discuss and interpret the data together, but we don't have that community there. So also make it difficult. It's like, to make the point, it just kind of, it's not data engagement. It's just not just look at the data and analyze the data to see the patterns, but it's kind of embedded in this web of everyday life, web of one's intention, knowledge, online resources, other users, and so on. So, okay, so we found that stress data engagement is challenging, so try to do some ongoing and future work to adjust that. For example, using different media for data engagement, look at the social practices like peer support social practices for mental health, and the future looking into the citizen science approach or HRV for preventive health. So that's it for my talk. So see if you have more questions. Yep.
I have a question. So,
I hope we get the
Okay.
I'm not the person, so I wouldn't use like traditional Chinese medicine, but I do know that like it was like placebo effects could sometimes be positive in some cases. So even if somebody gives me like a sugar pill and tells me it will help treat your condition, probably I'll be less anxious. If I'm less anxious, probably better. We know that anxiety reduces immunity, for example. So I would be happy to have like someone tells me this is something that will make you feel better, and it does impact my anxiety or stress levels or something. But as Mark was saying earlier, telling someone that this is something that will treat you where we're not really sure if it will treat you could, it's problematic from that perspective. So how do we balance all of those things? Like if someone will get a benefit from a certain treatment, but it's not really the benefit that they're expecting, or it's not working the way they think it's working. Like we're basically tricking them into feeling better. In some cases, if you give someone a sugar pill, for example, I'm not talking about, I don't know about Chinese medicine, but I'm talking about like placebo things, for example.
I'm not sure, kind of, I think to me, there's something we need to do probably beyond technology. For example, like a traditional Chinese medicine, it's kind of a lot of people, a lot of my colleagues actually, they don't believe it, and so that's why I'm not doing TCM right now, because it costs a lot of arguments and debates. But I think it's a matter of cultural education too. Like people don't know about TCM. They don't spend a lot of time reading about it or learning about it, because it's not like in the past the whole population relies on TCM for their health, right? But today we mainly, if we have any issues, we go to the hospital. What we know better is the Western medicine, and so we don't have a lot of opportunities to help to make people learn about it and to understand it. So to me, that's kind of more a cultural issues, and probably we need to do through other means, not through technologies, probably. And also make it more difficult is we also lost a lot of TCM traditions, and some of the TCM practices today are very different from the traditional TCM practices, and also make people more confused about which is the more authentic way. It's more complex. TCM is very complex, but yeah, I don't know. I'm looking into other use based on other rationale and technologies. Mhm.
Question about the second project, the stress. I'm wondering if what in the study, what did you find people were more interested in? Was it more when because like you said, when I'm stressed, typically I know that I'm stressed, and I'm also I know what the cause of the stress is. But how much emphasis was there on mitigating strategies and experimenting with different stress reduction techniques and seeing whether they had an impact or not? Is there any interest? Did people talk about that at all?
For this project, no, we just found that people they look at the stress data more casually. It's not like, oh, I wanted to understand my stress, I will read it very closely. They just, oh, there's a stress tracking feature. Oh, it's my stress is high then and low here. But most of the time they don't understand what that means. And so just kind of look at the data, but doesn't make any use of it. So that's the current stage. So that's what I wanted to do. I want to do in the future to see how we have the data available, but if people don't make sense of it, then it's useless, right? So what I wanted to design some interactive and collaborative technologies to help them engage with the data. It's still hard to tell at this stage what kind of mechanism will work. Okay.
We have time for one question. Yeah.
About this developed mobile application. So after following those recommendations, your mobile application can detect the things you provide some improvement. Okay, you follow this recommendation, you got 10% improvement from the last time. The mobile application can detect or provide you some improvement.
You mean improvement of their health?
Yeah, so I have some problems. I follow this
Yeah.
recommendation, and after following those recommendations, the mobile application itself can
Right.
provide some.
Yeah,
some feedback about it.
the report will show, yeah, for example, from unbalanced constitutional type into balanced. Actually, in our study, we saw that kind of cases. They checked later and I found, oh, I'm balanced, I'm very happy. So that's mainly on the report.
How related is there any way we can
At this point, it's mainly based on their own experience. Like, oh, I do feel better. I couldn't sleep well, but now I don't have that issue. That's mainly based on their feelings and their own experience.
Okay, so let's we're run out of time, unfortunately. So let's thanks for joining.
Thank you.